the bumblebees and large bodied bees that can do buzz pollination can get the pollen, and they use the pollen from partridge pea. It's wonderful to listen to a partridge pea patch in the summer. They're always humming. But you'll see other activity because there are little nectar pots near the base of each leaf. So if you look at the kind of little rusty spots that you see in the picture, those are little nectar pots. They're called extrafloral nectaries. And I've seen many kinds of wasps and even some, little bees. I don't know, this is some sort of a little sweat bee, I suppose, that use the nectar from these things. So this is kind of a lot of effort on the part of a plant to make a whole bunch of sugar water for insects that aren't moving its pollen around. You think of why it would do that? Have you ever watched a wasp eat meat? Yes. Some know. Some of their favorite meat is caterpillars. And I don't know if all species of wasps do this, but I have watched paper wasps get a hold of a caterpillar off of one of my cabbage plants in my garden and just basically start at the head end and just go like somebody eating a long john. Yeah, with kind of a similar result if they're not very careful. And so think about, what if that plant's being attacked by caterpillars? And it's got all of these wonderful potential enemies of caterpillars coming to those little pop machines and getting free sugar water in exchange for a little bit of a security service. That's my thinking. I wonder. Okay, so there are a lot of insects that feed on leaves. And as a seed producer, I sometimes have some mixed feelings about these because if you lose too many leaves, those are the solar collectors for the plant, right? That's how they get their energy so that they can make seeds. So I kind of look at these with some scrutiny. And especially when I see a whole bunch of caterpillars together that are really putting a lot of holes and stress on that leaf, I want to know what those are and if there's something I need to worry about. So of course, what do? I live here in Cedar Falls. There's UNI. I work for UNI. There are biology professors who know their stuff. We talked to Dr. Mark Myers about this, and he said, why don't you rear some of these caterpillars and find out what they are? Great. So he gave us a little cage. We reared them for a while. I took a terrible picture of a chrysalis with my phone. I have a better phone now. And then out came this beautiful little butterfly, which we were able to identify as a Gorgon checkered spot butterfly. And what we found out since then is that these caterpillars will form these gregarious feeding clusters on the leaves of wild sunflowers, on pale purple coneflower, on our sweet black-eyed Susan, but they never do a ton of damage. And so we just enjoy them and think about, what they're going to become. On the other hand,
oh yeah.
Yeah. We don't really appreciate the Japanese beetles so much. They are really strongly attracted to one of our native legumes, which is called showy tick trefoil, and they'll form these feeding aggregations on the flowers of those. And they actually release a pheromone when they're feeding that attracts others to them. And there's all kinds of hysteria about when the beetles are coming and all kinds of pesticides and junk that people put out there on their yards for these things. Wish you wouldn't, even though I don't like the beetles. We started out trying to control them so we get some seed off of these plants, because if the insects eat your flowers, you're not going to get any seed, right? So we started out, I had two teachers helping me one summer, my former colleague Paul Mugen, and here's Logan Morg. And we would go out every morning, knock the beetles off into soapy water. Yeah, you've been there, you feel my pain. And we got so many beetles, and these guys got interested in quantifying how many beetles there were and all this. And yeah, it was fun, but it didn't do much good. The next year, I dug into some entomology stuff, some integrated pest management stuff from one of the universities that no longer just tells me to kill everything. And this is at Missouri State. And they had done a study in berry farms where they installed these pheromone traps, but not just one, which just brings all the beetles in, right? They installed a perimeter of pheromone traps all the way around the crop they wanted to protect. And so we're like, hey, we'll try that. And we did. And I also improved our harvest techniques, but we got about 10 times as much seed that year as we had the previous year. So that was pretty exciting. And we didn't have to put any neonicotinoid insecticides in the ground. Thank you. Okay. So these are another bane of my existence sometimes. These are aphids. They suck the sap from plants. And when they're in large aggregations like these, they can weaken plants, reduce their flowering and seed set. And in some cases in the milkweeds, I've even seen plants die after a really heavy batch of these milkweeds. And this is another case where if you're on Facebook and you're in native plant circles, you'll see all kinds of panic around the oleander aphids by about July or August in the summer, and people talking about what they do about them. Well, a lot of what we do about them is we scout for them, we notice where they are. If they get really, really bad, we might go out with a bottle of soapy water and a glove on our hand, and actually I've gotten so hard, it's hard anymore, gloves anymore, and we squish them. But even more importantly, we watch for their enemies. And their enemies are plentiful. So if you look over here, that little guy with the stripes is a flower fly larva. So our little hover flies that buzz around our flowers and pollinate things, oh, they're also eating aphids. How wonderful is that? Up here, right here, you see that aphid that's turned into kind of a weird reddish color? It's a zombie aphid. It's been infected by a parasitoid wasp. Another wonderful little helper for us. This interesting looking monster is a lacewing larva. If you've ever seen the adults, they come by their name, honestly. They have beautiful, delicate lacy wings and golden eyes and they're green. But these little fierce buggers, they can actually pinch you, but I don't mind because they're eating aphids. And you just gotta know to leave them alone. And then of course over here is one of my favorite things since I was 4 years old, a ladybird beetle larva, which also feeds on aphids. So our milkweeds and our, this is on Canada milkvetch, those things are protected by their natural enemies. Okay, then finally seed feeding things. These are a little bit more difficult for me to love, even when they're so nappily dressed. I mean, look at that. I mean, the little black vest, so sweet. But they also have this incredible little mouth part, this little proboscis that pierces that milkweed pod, gets into the seeds, injects times, and then slurps out the contents. That's not good for seeds. So I get a little bit upset about these guys, and when I find aggregations or feeding clusters of these on milkweed pods, I will often go out there and wipe them off. The little soft-bodied nymphs, kind of sadly, are easy to kill that way. Should you do that on your milkweed plants? I don't think so. They're native insects. They're part of the ecosystem. They're not doing any harm. You're not a seed producer, I don't think. So I think watch them, enjoy them. They're beautiful. Another seed-eating bug, a true bug or hemiptera, is this little twice-stabbed stink bug. Tom, I'd like to hear you say that fast. Neither can I, so it's okay. Twice-stabbed stink bug likes that same little plant that the fierce little wool carder bee defends. This is Stachys tylosa. When we harvest seed of this, we find that about half of it is empty. And it's probably on account of those little bugs. We find lots of them on them. And then there was the mystery of the empty rose seeds. So these are rose hips, Rosa arkansana, or the prairie rose, which is, it's a culturally and ecologically significant species. It's a state flower of Iowa, for goodness sake. And one of the things we noticed when we first harvested a bucket of these in the fall was that some of the hips are brown instead of the red that they kind of ought to be, right? And when we looked into that and we separated out the seeds from the brown hips and the red hips, we found that a lot of the seeds from the red hips were filled. They had nice healthy seeds inside of them. And a lot of the seeds from the brown hips were either shriveled and empty, or they had a little larva inside. And so of course we talked to our friends and they said, why don't you rear some of those up? And so we did. And out came these little wasps. I think they're called megastigma. They're a little parasite of rose seeds. That's the male right there. That's the female with the long ovipositor. And then, whoop. So we even got to observe the little wasps in action. So what do we do about these? We really can't do much because they lay their eggs in the developing rose hips while the plants are still blooming. So anything that we would do to try to prevent these things from developing would also negatively impact the pollinators, I'm guessing. But we tolerate that. So a few little tidbits of other levels of the trophic web out in the seed plots. I love jumping spiders. Can't resist including a picture of a jumping spider in just about everything I do. Those little faces, they really look at you. This is a brilliant jumping spider. Both of these are brilliant jumping spiders. That's their name, Phidippus claris. They help us out with by consuming a lot of those leaf feeding insects. They also go after some of our pollinators. There's this is a spider on a spiderwort plant. But they could have an impact that's really significant. And they're even being looked at, this particular species is being looked at as a biocontrol for a type of bug that damages basil crops. And then there are some really nifty relationships out there. So I think I showed you when I walked through the mountain mint field that there were potter wasps out there. That's a potter wasp. This is not. That's a fly. And that fly, the thick-headed fly, has a really interesting life cycle. So it looks like one of our little wasps that visits flowers. So if you're another visitor of a flower, you probably wouldn't give it a second glance, but you probably should if you're a bee. The females of the species like have an ovipositor that's been likened to a can opener, and they catch bees in flight, glom onto them, pry open their body segments, and lay an egg in there. And some of them actually induce the bees to bury themselves in the ground before that larva then pupates and emerges. So I mean, it's just amazing. This little guy is a feather-legged fly, so also not a bee, even though it's so good at its camouflage that it even has like little pollen baskets on its legs. That's why I guess it's the name feather-legged fly. And this one lays its eggs on stink bugs and parasitizes them. And this one, this is a little tiny thing. I mean, I don't know if you know, this is a verbena seed head, and verbena seeds are quite small. So this thing is, I don't know, maybe an eighth of an inch long. They're just super, super tiny. It's a little wasp. And this is a hyper parasitoid. And it's really unusual. And then instead of laying its eggs on a host, it lays its eggs on the plant. And the little larvae have to crawl and find themselves a host, but it's not even their host. They want to get inside that host so they can find another parasitoid that's inside the host. And that's what they parasitize. It's just wild. Yeah. And it's just so beautiful. I mean, I wouldn't even have noticed it if I hadn't been out in the verbena patch, and there's just this gem of like intense sapphire just on that seed head. And then to learn about what it does for a living blows my mind. Okay, quiz time. Everybody wake up. Okay, which one is a real wasp? A, B, C, or D?
All of them.
All of the above.
All of the above? C? D? Okay, you're gonna get used to trick questions. It's none of the above. Aren't they amazing? Okay, so this one's a beetle. This one's a locust borer. They love goldenrods in the fall, so you can almost always find them on goldenrods. This is a goldenrod soul beetle, which you always can find on goldenrods. This one is a Spiomaya. It's a hornet, eastern hornet fly. It's actually a fly. It's so clever. When I first looked at it, I was like, what's that weird wasp? And it wasn't. And then this one, it's a moth. This one is a, it bores into, as larvae live in horse nettle plants. Horse nettle is a vicious little thing in the tomato and potato family. And this thing eats it. So wild things. Okay, another quiz. Which one is the, okay, this is Audubon Society, you guys are gonna know this. Which one is the real bird poop? None of the above, you guys know, none of the above. Okay, so this one is a viceroy caterpillar on a willow. This one, oh my gosh, Ponamicia moth, I think is the name of it. Oh, yeah, I think it's called the bird dropping moth.
It is.
Yeah, there you go. And this, does anybody know what this is? It's a beetle larva. It's a tortoise beetle larva, and tortoise beetles are really, really beautiful. The larvae, maybe not so much. They literally coat themselves in their own feces. So, I mean, with these, I think, what better way to protect yourself from a bird than to look like something that's already passed through a bird? Or to just be covered in your own poop. I mean, sometimes when I walk through prairies in the summer, I end up with like streaks from the tortoise beetle. Okay, and quiz time. Which plant is wind pollinated? Don't tell the bees, or I mean the bees and finger quotes. Come on, class, you can do this. None of them? All of them? How many votes for all of them? Oh, some people are brave. Yeah, this is good. These are all classic wind pollinated plants. They're all grasses. Can you believe that? I mean, if you open up any biology textbook and you're like wind pollination, you're going to see pine trees and grasses, right? So this is Kelm's brome. This is prairie cordgrass, and this one is big blue stem. And there are bees on the two to your left, and this is a little hoverfly. And so, you know, I love the fact that in biology, we have these boxes that we put things in, but the plants and the insects don't care about those boxes. And so they'll do all kinds of things. So all of these insects are feeding happily on grass pollen. Whether the grasses are getting anything out of it or not, I don't know. Maybe there's a little pollen that gets transferred in the process. Who knows? Let's see. Uh-oh. I wore out the mouse. It must be time for snacks. Can you advance it there?
No, it won't do that either.
It's all frozen up. Maybe it's because not enough people raise their hands. We haven't gotten to the urban prairie part. Uh-oh, we have to reload? Or is your entire computer frozen up?
No, it's not.
I can still talk even if there aren't pictures.
There it went.
Better. Did it go? Yay. Go back into the slideshow. Can we get back to the? Yes, and we can go click. Yes. Okay. So this is one of my favorite things. A couple years ago, it was a great year for grasshoppers. I think it was 2022, and they were just everywhere. And then it became a not so great year for them because we started seeing this all around. The grasshoppers would climb up to the tops of whatever plant they were on, grab hold for dear, not life. And they would just kind of freeze there. And even when they were still kind of partly alive, you'd poke them and they just wouldn't respond. So some had taken over their nervous system, and we just kept seeing them. And I kind of developed a habit of taking pictures of them. I just thought it was so fascinating. And one of the interesting things about them is when you see a fly that's been infected with an entomopathogenic fungus, you'll often see fungal, like sporulating bodies coming out from between the segments of that insect. But when we were looking at these grasshoppers, we didn't. But the thing that we did see sometimes is that because they were easy pickings at the tops of plants, they would get targeted by birds. And this is another thing where I don't know, but I think it's curious that they were being eaten by birds and you couldn't see the spore bodies. Maybe the birds are transmitting these fungi through their droppings. I don't know. It's a question. But there were so many of them. They were on all sorts of things. Okay, so we are finally to the urban prairie part of things. And actually, I think this is where I'm gonna need my notes. I always make lots of notes and then I don't use them. Okay, so right now, if you go out to urban prairie, it's going to be a fairly quiet place, except that you chase up lots of pheasants, and you probably see a lot of little American tree sparrows. And you might see the harrier crossing over. So there's a lot of activity, but you're not going to hear the buzzing that you would hear during the summer. And in the summer, it's a really active place with all the insects visiting the diverse flowers that we have out there. And sometimes those insects that visit the flowers aren't your bees and butterflies, but they are things like these tree crickets. And I don't know what species of tree cricket it is. I probably should have done due diligence and figured that out, but I did learn something about their behavior that intrigued me a lot. And that is, we've got a pair here. So clearly there's something going on. But what's interesting is the one that has the ovipositor right there is the one on top. And she looks like she's eating something from under the wings of the male. And that was so weird that I had to look some things up about that. And it turns out that this is his way of giving her a gift that helps to induce her to take his spermatophore. And in the process, he's transmitting this fluid from a gland under his wings that's tasty and is full of amino acids so that she can do a better job of rearing eggs that carry his genes. So this is called a nuptial gift. And there's quite a few insects that do that kind of thing, that give that sort of a gift. But it's cool, it's a gland under his wing. Some of the buzz at urban prairie is about some of the insects that we've been finding that wouldn't have been there when it was a cornfield or a soybean field. And this is a bee that we saw last fall that is called a golden northern bumblebee. It's a grassland species that's also in decline, which is common to many of our bumblebees. And this is on field thistle. This is a native thistle, very beneficial plant. And this is a new queen. And the fact that there were new queens that day, as well as males like this one on a nearby blazing star, tells us that there had to have been a nest somewhere in that area. And that's a really good sign that urban prairie is providing the resources that a colony of bumblebees needed to establish itself and feed its young and produce new reproductives that would go out and found new colonies next year. And then, because I don't get to spend enough time out at urban prairie, I don't get to be out there as often as I'd like or for as long as I'd like, because the summer is a really busy time for me in the plots. So, you know what? I found a friend or emailed a friend, and I said to both Iwen and MJ Hatfield, if some of you know her, said, what are some of the interesting observations that you've seen out at urban prairie? And Iwen sent me these images of this wasp. I'm sorry, this bee. Sorry, this is a bee that is a nest parasite on another species of bee. So if you think about your biology, if you've got a predator, that means you have to have enough of the prey to support the predator, right? So there's, generally speaking, there's more prey animals than there are predators. Same thing goes for parasites. So if you see a parasite, you know that there's a big enough population of the host to support that parasite. So, you know, we think of parasites, oh, yuck, but at the same time, they're a good sign. And we've never seen the host of this bee at urban prairie, but the parasite is there. So we know the host has to be there. And neither of them is a common bee. So this is very exciting. Did I get it right, I? Awesome. Okay. And then MJ sent me some things. And MJ is amazing. If you haven't met her before, she's technically retired, but she's like a full-time entomologist. And she has a real kind of a life goal to show how the insects can tell us when we are being successful at reestablishing ecosystems. And so she's gone out a couple times to urban prairie and she's recorded her observations on bugguide.net, which is an amazing resource. If you post your pictures on there, there are experts, if they're good enough pictures, there are experts on there who will help you identify the insects. And I've done that with some of my stuff, but MJ is fantastic about it. And so if you use, I can give you this link later if you ask me, if you use that link, you can go to, it'll show you a search page where she's got all of her observations from urban prairie. And on there are a couple that I pulled out because I think they're just so cool. There's this, I think it's a cone-headed fly. And I can't find very much information about them on the internet, even though I have their scientific name. Is there much known about these guys? Wen shakes her head no. So amazing. I think there's like 2 observations of these recorded from Iowa.
Yeah.
Period. And both are MJ. Yeah. So wonderful thing. Conoceps niger, I think. And then this beautiful little clear wing moth right here. And this one, its hosts are things in the aster family like Helenium autumnale, which is common sneezeweed, which is kind of common in the lowland areas of urban prairie. So what MJ says is a quote in my title up there: from cropland to habitat, the proof is in the insects. I think she's right. And as you know, plants feed insects, and insects are baby bird food. And this dick thistle, like all the male dick thistles in the area, they set up their territories out in urban prairie. You'll see them, they love to perch in some of the taller plants like this Canadian milk vetch and sing their hearts out, defending those territories. And then we see nests. I don't think this is a dick thistle nest. The egg has some markings on it, but I think it might be some kind of a sparrow, but I'm not sure. And we can see that food web happening out there. So there's a female dick thistle there who's caught herself a nice juicy grasshopper. She's sitting on a mare's tail plant, and this was in a first-year planting, where you see a lot of kind of the more weedy species coming up at first, but she was using it effectively as a perch from which to hunt grasshoppers. So each native plant species, even in our production plots, supports multiple kinds of insects. Insects support all kinds of other organisms. So what do? Plant native plants. Be like my friend Maria, who bought seed from a local seed producer in Iowa and seeded part of her backyard into Prairie a couple of years ago. You can find more information on the Tallgrass Prairie Center website. We have a seed and service provider list there. You can also get together or look at the website for the wild ones. It'd be awesome if somebody started a wild ones chapter here in the Cedar Valley. Social media groups are great resources as well. And sometimes you'll find some native plants at your farmers markets. Other resources, I want to encourage you to share your observations of insects, even if you're like me and you don't know a lot about them. Take pictures, walk slowly, look carefully, ask questions, share your pictures with experts and learn more. And so there's several different websites where you can submit observations. And anytime you have cool stuff to share about prairie plants and insects, feel free to reach out to me. I also have my card with me today. And one last parting shot of urban prairie. And then any questions, or do you want to just go straight to snacks? I don't even know what time it is. Questions? Okay. I've overwhelmed everyone. Yes.
What, do you do any burning to restore any of your seed plots, or how do you use mow or?
Awesome question. Okay, so do we burn or do we mow, or what do we do to maintain the seed plots? The answer is it depends. So with a lot of the wildflowers, we simply mow them off. With the grasses in the seed production plots, we burn them annually. I don't recommend annual burning for diverse prairie plantings, but for maintaining a single species stand of grass, it works pretty well. Out at urban prairie, we are instituting burn plans out there. This year, we're going to be burning about 80 acres. And we do accept volunteers. Lots of things anybody can do out there. Any other questions?
I always got one.
You got one? Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I've done small prairie plots in my yard. Maybe if it was, what a huge difference. And I've seen a number of things that you have there. It's so much fun to look at the insects and the birds and all the life that's going on. So my question to you is, I have a small space, maybe about one in the front yard like that, and like the light tile that you're standing on there.
Yeah.
And another one in the back, one in the garage. I have one plant of showy sunflower, had over 50 bumblebees on it at one time, one plant. That's a really beautiful plant. My question to you is, if somebody's gonna start something like that, it's a little piece in your yard, what kind of mix would you recommend for in the town? You know, stuff?
My answer again is it depends. So a lot of things depends on your, the amount of sun you get. And also issues of visibility and where it is in proximity to your neighbors. So I think, what I would do is first, think about those issues. You need to have quite a bit of sun to have effective prairie plantings. If you have some part shade, maybe some more of your savanna type species would work. And there are also plenty of natives for shade, and they're very important. A lot of them bloom early in the season. If you have a corner lot, you've got to watch out for visibility, so you would stick with shorter species, and that would be a thing to do. And in general, you can go to the native plant websites, and some of them provide a lot of information, and they'll have specific seed mixes for different kinds of situations. Look at the lists of those species in those seed mixes, and those can give you lots of ideas. You could go ahead and buy that mix, or you can purchase individual species and start make your own mix. You can also start from plants. And if you're a newcomer to native plants and you're wanting to control the design of a planting in your yard because you want it to look nice, both for yourself and for the neighbors, then I'd say start with plants, because it gives you more control over where the plants go, where they come up, and what they look like. But those are, that's a subject for a whole other time. Yes. A question from the computer. Oh, yeah, it's from our remote audience. How awesome. Oh. What kind of insect eats the seeds of Tripsicum dactyloides? I have never purposely grown Tripsicum in seed production plots. We do have, it's Eastern Gamma grass. We do have some of it on site at the Tallgrass Prairie Center, but it's not in an active seed production plot. So I haven't paid attention to that. My guess, if I were to hazard a guess at what insect might be eating seeds of a grass, I might guess that it would be a gull midge. But I'm just pulling something out of thin air there. But I do know that there are a lot of gull midges that eat grass seed. Yeah, that's interesting. Now I'm curious. I'm gonna delve into it next on those plants that are out in the plot. Yeah.
So as part of your job, do you spend any time promoting planting native plants for just people with yards and trying to get them not to spray, not to have just total bluegrass yards, because it seems like there's so many more companies that are actually promoting that kind of thing, so that we continue to have more butterflies and that.
Yeah, for remote people, the question is about, in my job, do I do something to help promote people doing more ecological types of gardening and lawn care? And the answer is that I don't do a lot of it actually directly in my job, but I have, given some talks for public events that do promote those things. That's where I think it would be really neat. If you haven't heard of the organization, The Wild Ones, look them up. See if you can drum up interest in this area for establishing a group here. There are some chapters in, I think there's one in Sioux City. There's one, I think, in the Quads. And it would be really nice to have a chapter around here, because that would be an organization that could do a lot of that work. Yeah, it's an important thing to do. Great. There was another question. Yeah.
Seeds that you're producing, growing, then are you selling it to those seed companies for them to grow, or are you just giving it to them?
We do charge a fee to those seed growers for the use of that seed. But it's not enough to support the program. It helps us a little bit with some spare equipment costs and things like that. So yeah, we provide the seed to the native seed growers, then they increase that to commercial scale production. So, and by doing that, by getting that seed from us, they get several things. They get assurance that that seed is going to correctly identified in the first place when it was collected from remnant prairies. They get the assurance that it was collected from Iowa remnant prairies. We have all that documented, and that it was collected in ways that help to ensure that it was genetically diverse so that it will be able to be resilient and respond to, you know, our crazy weather and climate as they are. Is it snack time?
But first,
But first,
Yeah.
it's song and dance.
yeah, you're right, yeah. You know, I was just thinking of, I was just reading about, some of the smartest people are the ones that answer questions by saying, I don't know. And it's a really good answer. You're a smart one here. But, you know, when you start looking around, like Laura was saying, you look at the birds, you look at the plants, what's on there, it's so wild. It is so interesting. And then you're just always wondering, you know, what's going on. And it's way better than TV or the news, you know, that's for sure.
It's hard to get bored and depressed
Right.
when you're learning about hyperparasitoids.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Laura. But yeah,
Did I win the eggs?
let's find out.
There you go.
We're gonna bring that up here and we'll have Laura draw 2 names for eggs.
No, wait a second. If I draw my own name,
It's
that's a look
legit.
at.
It's legit.
That's a legit.
Okay, all right. My eyes are closed.
Yeah, you're not drawing dollar bills on it. Anybody want to draw the box?
Okay.
Okay,
Too late now.
number 1.
Number 1 is Al Sunt.
Yep.
All right.
Al.
All right, congratulations. My goodness, what a prize. What a prize.
You're gonna have a breakfast tomorrow.
Yeah, not only eggs, but
Whoops.
oh no,
Man.
and 52 card pickup.
I learned that from you, Lester.
Uh-oh.
No, that's my fault. There we go.
Okay, hang on to that money. Okay, let's see.
Yes, I got some. Maybe I got a blank.
Let's see. Okay, I found one. Let me see. This one is blank.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
That's
Okay.
mine.
That's
All
fine.
right, so this one is, no way.
Yeah, you?
Perfect. We should draw again. We should draw again.
No, we don't need to give her a check.
No, I don't want to check.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, that's so great.
Thank you for all that donated for this. And thank you especially to Lester. He brings us corn and other things all the time. He's just a great guy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. So next month, we have 3 wonderful photographers talking about how they got photography, and you don't want to miss it. It'll be a really good show.
She could sell that dozen eggs, and get 2 gallons of gas.
Right.